2025 on a domestic forum, a user named Yongjuan made a post describing an extremely terrifying incident. The original poster said that to this day, they don't dare to enter deep mountains anymore, and at night they can't sleep with the lights off. Every time they close their eyes, they recall the scene they witnessed in the mountains many years ago during that summer. So without further ado, please put on your headphones. The story begins. Let's call the poster Xiao I. This happened in summer 2013. Xiao I had just finished junior high. During that summer break, she loved hanging out with childhood friends. Among these childhood friends, there was one named Xiao D, who was notorious for being a troublemaker. Back in school, he had a bad habit of bullying classmates. Later, he didn't get into the county high school, and after the summer break, he went to the south to work. Xiao D was closest to Xiao I. The two of them both loved playing basketball, and whenever either of them ran into trouble, Xiao D was always the first to help. When they had free time, Xiao D would often look for Xiao I to hang out. After graduating from high school, Xiao D went to another city for college. I heard that he now works at a major internet company, but after graduating from college, we haven't really kept in touch. The last one is Xiao D. In Xiao I's memory, Xiao D was a particularly gentle guy, did well in his studies, and was also Xiao I's neighbor. Back in middle school, Xiao I's family always compared her grades with Xiao D's, but Xiao I really liked Xiao D because he had such a great personality. Sometimes he was even a bit like a girl. Xiao I and the others grew up together in the countryside. There was a large stretch of forested hills around their village, but when they were little, they were timid and never ventured far into the mountains. They would just wander around the wheat fields and never dared to go deep into the woods. Back then, the thing they did most often was to build a fire with their friends in a clearing in the woods and roast potatoes. Sometimes they would bring lots of snacks, and there were even a few times when they bought instant noodles and brought a stainless steel pot from home just to cook the noodles over the campfire. Every time they brought the pot back, Xiao Ai's parents would always scold her when they saw the bottom of the pot burned black. Sometimes, they would even hit her, but even though she was scared, Xiao Ai still couldn't help but secretly want to bring the pot along. When the old village was relocated from the mountain after 4 years, the place where the old house used to be was leveled and turned into an apple orchard. Xiao Ai and her friends loved to run into the orchard and secretly pick apples to eat. There was an old man who watched over the orchard on the hillside, but they were always very sneaky and only went when the old man wasn't around. They were never caught, not even once. Every summer vacation, they would go play in the mountains every few days. Those days were especially joyful, right up until they graduated from junior high. During the summer after graduating from junior high, Xiao Ai and her friends were a bit older, and their parents gradually relaxed their restrictions on them. At night, the group of friends loved to stay out and not go home, telling their parents in advance that they were going to a friend's house for a birthday and would be staying over for the night. But in reality, they were either spending the night playing games at an internet cafe in the county, or pooling their money to rent a hotel room where they would play cards, mahjong, drink, and enjoy time that belonged just to them. Until one day, still during that summer vacation, Xiao A and 3 friends were hanging out at home playing games, when Xiao B suddenly suggested, "Why don't we spend a night in the deep mountains?" This idea was indeed quite novel, since they had never camped out in the mountains before. The 4 of them, chatting idly, all agreed on the spot. The very night the plan was proposed, they started getting things ready. The next morning, the group met up at the village square. Xiao A bought instant noodles and also packed practical items like flashlights, bandages, and other medical supplies. Xiao B brought some snacks, kisses, fire-starting sticks, and spicy tofu skin rolls, filling an entire backpack with them. Xiao C also brought some snacks, and in addition, packed several cans of beer, filling up his backpack as well. Xiao D's family was a bit poorer, so they didn't force him to buy anything. He just brought a bamboo mat from home and a pot, saying it was for cooking instant noodles. That day was sunny, and the sun was especially intense. Around 10 in the morning, the group arrived at the foot of the mountain and entered the woods, where it was much cooler than in the village. The cicadas were chirping non-stop, and as they walked, they chatted and laughed, the atmosphere especially cheerful. The path up the mountain was a 5 or 6 meter wide concrete road. At the end of the concrete road was the entrance to the forest, and next to it stood an abandoned elementary school. That school held 2 years of memories for Xiao because he attended kindergarten and first grade there. But after first grade, the whole village moved down the mountain, and the school was left unused. The land beside it was turned into an apple orchard, but for some reason the school itself was always preserved. When Xiao A was in 4th or 5th grade, he and his friends even played gunfights in there, using toy guns and eliminating whoever got hit. But this time, when they passed by that school, they made a point to go inside and take a look. It wasn't as dilapidated as they had imagined. Instead, it had been converted into a temple. However, there was no one inside. It looked like it hadn't been used for worship for several months. There were still incense sticks in the burner, with a layer of ash settled on top. You could tell that it hadn't been abandoned for years. At most, it had just been left unused for a few months. After leaving the abandoned school, they immediately headed up the mountain. The fruits in the orchard all looked nearly ripe, green tinged with a bit of red. He casually picked a few and put them in his backpack. Following the path through the orchard to the end, they reached vast stretches of terraced fields. The wheat had already been harvested by mid-June, so now the fields were filled with newly planted seedlings, a lush green expanse. Standing on the mountaintop and looking down was truly spectacular. They chatted and laughed while playing music, and after walking for over an hour, they finally passed through the wheat fields and were met by a dense, dark forest ahead. By then, it was already noon, and the sound of insects chirping was loud and clear. At this moment, the bamboo mat that the younger brother had brought finally came in handy. They spread the mat on the ground, set out some snacks, grabbed a few bottles of beer, and started eating and drinking heartily. Xiao D even pulled out a deck of cards, and the group played cards while drinking, having a great time. It was indeed cool under the trees, but there were quite a lot of annoying mosquitoes, as well as some ants. Sometimes, if you left an open snack bag out for a while, a few ants would crawl onto it. After this leisurely break, they continued deeper into the mountains. At this point, the road was no longer paved with cement, but had turned into a dirt path about 4 or 5 meters wide. When they first started walking, there were still tracks on the ground left by tricycles, but after about 2 or 3 hours, the road gradually became narrower, eventually turning into a small path through the forest. Their pace slowed down, not because the road was difficult, but simply because they were too exhausted to keep going, especially the youngest brother, who was already frail, so the 4 of them basically had to rest after walking for a while. By the time it was past 6 in the evening, the sky was gradually darkening, and the forest was getting denser. Eventually, they stopped beside a row of abandoned cave dwellings, which looked like a pretty good spot to camp for the night. That row of cave dwellings was on their right-hand side, dug out from the base of a slope more than 10 meters high, and there were 3 caves in total. They walked over and chose the one at the very back, then went inside. Fortunately, the inside of the cave dwelling wasn't overgrown with weeds. The ground was surprisingly dry, covered entirely with that particularly dry yellow earth. Only a few weeds grew at the base of the walls, and in one corner there was a stove about as high as A's waist, clearly abandoned for decades. There were traces of old fires on the ground, but aside from that, there was nothing else. As it got later and later, they gathered some dry branches in the woods and picked a large pile of leaves. They spread the leaves on the floor of the cave dwelling, then laid the bamboo mat on top so it wouldn't be so uncomfortable to lie down. After tidying up, they lit a fire inside the cave. Just as the fire was started, night had completely fallen. This cave dwelling originally should have had doors and windows, but after so many years, the frames of the windows and doors had been weathered and widened, though you could still make out their original shapes. Because of this, there was still a layer of crumbling earthen wall outside. They lay on the bamboo mat, eating and chatting idly, with the fire burning right in front of the mat. Suddenly Xiao D joked, "With the fire in front of us and us lying on this mat, doesn't it feel like we're burning paper offerings for the dead?" As soon as he said this, everyone instantly fell silent. The others all told Xiao D not to make such jokes in the mountains at night, but the more they tried to stop him, the more he kept talking. Just as the atmosphere in the group was getting colder, Xiao D suddenly pulled out a bag from his backpack, wrapped in a red plastic bag. Then he took out more than a dozen green bottles from the plastic bag. Everyone asked what it was. Xiao D picked up one of the bottles and pointed to the name on it. It turned out to be ergo 2, the kind of cheap liquor that cost only 2 yuan a bottle, so cheap that even adults use it to pour on the ground when visiting graves. Xiao A usually doesn't like drinking baijiu, and just now even said he wouldn't drink, but the others insisted that he join them, so Xiao A had no choice but to take a bottle as well, drinking and chatting with them. As they drank, everyone started to get a little drunk, and Xiao A also began to feel drowsy. Without realizing it, he fell asleep. He didn't know how much time had passed when he groggily woke up. By then, the firewood was almost burned out, leaving only a faint red glow. Xiao A was woken up by the urge to pee. He was a bit scared at the time, but he really couldn't hold it anymore, so he grabbed a flashlight and went outside to relieve himself. Because he was afraid, he didn't go far. He just peed on the left wall by the entrance of the cave dwelling. At that moment, he vaguely heard a voice, like a woman's voice. The way she spoke sounded as if it had been slowed down to half speed, extremely muffled so he couldn't make out what was being said at all, but he was certain it was definitely a woman's voice. Xiao A was immediately stunned, but he tried to comfort himself, thinking it must be something like an owl making noise. After he finished peeing, he squatted in front of the cave dwelling and listened carefully. He thought to himself that if he didn't figure out the source of this sound, it might leave him with a psychological shadow for the rest of his life. So he tried his best to find where the sound was coming from, but the more he listened, the more it sounded like a woman's voice. And it seemed like the voice was getting closer and closer. He wasn't sure if it was the effect of the alcohol or something else. At that moment, Xiao A was still feeling pretty tough inside, because he didn't believe in ghosts or spirits. He thought to himself, this must just be an ordinary woman. But just as the voice was getting closer and seemed to be about 20 or 30 meters away, it suddenly stopped. At the same time, he noticed that the sounds of insects around him also stopped. The area around the cave dwelling became eerily quiet. There wasn't a single sound. Now Xiao A was completely panicked, so he hurriedly got up, ready to head back to the cave dwelling. But the moment he stood up, he suddenly felt dizzy and fainted right away, dropping his flashlight to the ground as well. At the very moment he stood up, his gaze unconsciously swept toward the direction illuminated by the flashlight. The beam happened to shine on a tree about 10 meters away, and in that instant, Xiao A felt his scalp tingle with fear, because there was a woman standing right in front of that tree. Xiao A was certain he hadn't seen it wrong, because the figure was especially clear. Her head was lowered, hair hanging loose, and she wasn't wearing anything at all. Her figure was rather bloated, but it was clear she was a woman because Xiao A could clearly see the outline of her upper body and her lower body. The sight made him feel especially disgusted because her body was just too bizarre. Her whole body was so pale it looked as if she had been soaked in water for a long time. That thing just stood there quietly, head always lowered, completely motionless. Xiao A was so terrified that he screamed out loud and even shouted curses at it, but it still didn't move at all. Xiao A immediately scrambled up and hurriedly ran back to the cave dwelling, shouting loudly to try to wake the others. But the others were sleeping like the dead. Only Xiao D woke up, rubbing his eyes and asking Xiao A what he was doing. Xiao A quickly pulled Xiao D and said, "There's someone outside, get up and take a look." Still half asleep, Xiao D followed Xiao A to the doorway. Xiao A pointed to the tree where he had just seen someone and said, "Right there was a woman standing there just now." Xiao D shone his flashlight in that direction, the beam sweeping over the tree trunk and the ground, but there was nothing there, just fallen leaves and weeds everywhere, so he told Xiao A that he must have drunk too much and was just scaring himself. Xiao A stared at that clearing. The scene from just now had been far too vivid, there was no way it could have been a hallucination. But now, there really was nothing there, so he could only follow Xiao D back to the cave dwelling. After being so frightened, Xiao A's sleepiness was completely gone. The craving for alcohol hadn't faded yet, and his head felt heavy as he tossed and turned on the bamboo mat, staring at the yellow earth ceiling of the cave dwelling. He couldn't shake off a sense of unease in his heart. He didn't know how long he endured like this. Just as Xiao A couldn't hold on any longer and was about to drift off to sleep in a daze, he suddenly felt a chill brush against his face. It wasn't the night breeze leaking in from the cave entrance. It was damp, clinging cold, as if someone was standing right in front of him, breathing. Xiao A suddenly opened his eyes wide and saw that there was actually a pair of feet right in front of him, only half a foot away from his face. Xiao A instantly froze. His throat felt blocked and he couldn't make a sound. He could even smell a strong, earthy odor mixed with the scent of decaying grass roots. He didn't dare look up, his eyes fixed on that pair of feet, not daring to move a muscle. Right after that, a faint sound of crying rang out. It was the voice of the woman he had heard earlier, coming from right above Xiao A's head. So close it felt like it was right next to his ear. Immediately after, Xiao A felt something hang down and brush across his forehead. He could tell it was hair, long, wet and slightly sticky, dragging across his face. Xiao A couldn't hold it in any longer. He shouted with all his might, pushed himself up from the ground and tried to scramble backward. But as soon as he got up, everything in front of him suddenly vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Not even a trace of those feet remained. But the woman's voice hadn't disappeared at all. The woman's voice echoed from every corner of the cave dwelling. Some were crying, some laughing, and others muttering words that couldn't be understood. There were voices everywhere, yet not a single person could be seen. Little B and Little C were startled awake by Little A's shouting. Rubbing their eyes, they were still groggy, but before they could finish speaking, those voices frightened them into silence. The drunkenness vanished from their faces in an instant, leaving them pale and speechless. "What is that? Make them come out now." Little B mustered up his courage and shouted, but as soon as he finished speaking, a loud and piercing wail suddenly echoed from inside the cave dwelling. The sound was so sharp it was like fingernails scraping across wood. At that moment, little D suddenly screamed, his voice breaking, and without even putting on his shoes, he stumbled and ran out of the cave dwelling. Little A, along with little B and little C, were instantly jolted into action by fear and immediately rushed out after him. The mountain path at night was impossible to see, covered in loose stones and tree roots. Little A had barely run a few steps before he tripped and fell, scraping his knee on a rock, but none of them dared to stop. The wailing behind them chased after them like a shadow. After running only a few steps, little A couldn't help but glance back. The scene was just too bizarre. Little A saw that the 3 abandoned cave dwellings were actually lit up. It definitely wasn't the firelight from earlier, but rather a dim, yellowish glow coming from each home. There seemed to be people standing at the entrances, swaying from side to side. The group scrambled and stumbled as they ran, their clothes torn by branches, but no one cared at the time. They just knew they had to run for their lives. They ran blindly for a long time, only stopping at the crumbling wall of the old school, panting for breath. The faint beam of their flashlight hit the glassless windows. Compared to the cave, this place felt safer. Its conversion into a temple offered a much-needed sense of comfort and sanctuary. The 3 of them stumbled into the school. The door on the first floor was broken, and they could see the incense burner inside. The incense sticks on it had long since burned out. Gasping for breath, Xiao D said, "Let's go to the second floor. I remember there are dormitories up there, and we can lock the door." Then they felt their way up the stairs. The dormitory door on the second floor was wooden. They rushed inside, locked the door from the inside, and pushed a broken table against it. Only then did they collapse to the floor, their whole bodies trembling, too exhausted to even speak. The dormitory was filled with dust, making them cough with every breath. The room was so dark they could only make out each other's shadows. None of them spoke, only the sound of their heavy breathing could be heard. But after just a few minutes, faint cries suddenly came from the distant hillside. It wasn't just one person, but several, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, as if they were coming down the mountain. In the stillness of the night, these sounds seemed especially eerie and terrifying. They were so frightened that they didn't even dare to breathe heavily, but the crying continued, getting closer and closer. Then, it actually stopped downstairs, as if someone was wandering around on the first floor, but after a short while, it suddenly disappeared. Just as they thought they could finally breathe a sigh of relief, a sudden, thunderous banging on the door erupted. The force was so great it was terrifying. The door shook violently, as if it could be broken down at any moment. I was so scared that she covered her mouth, her hands trembling. The banging lasted for about 3 minutes, then suddenly stopped, as if it had never happened at all. The room was so quiet they could hear their own heartbeats, along with the occasional sound of wind coming from outside the window. The 3 of them still held their positions, bracing the table against the door, not daring to move, afraid that if they let go, the door would be pushed open. After waiting for more than 10 minutes and making sure there was no movement outside, B finally crept over to the crack in the door to take a look outside. He looked for a long time before turning back and whispering, "No one. It's pitch black out there." They didn't dare go out again, so they huddled together in the corner of the dorm room, eyes wide open, waiting until dawn. When the sky outside began to lighten, C got up and walked to the window, lifted the tattered curtain, and looked out, then said, "It's almost dawn. It seems like nothing happened." The 3 of them supported each other as they walked out of the dormitory. Their bodies were still trembling as they went down the stairs. The layout on the first floor hadn't changed, and the entrance was still empty. They didn't dare linger and followed the mountain path down the hill, their legs still weak. It was only when they reached the shop at the entrance of the village that they stopped, bought a bottle of cold water, and gulped it down. Suddenly, Xiao A remembered Xiao D. In fact, the 3 of them had already noticed that Xiao D was missing just before they ran, but because they were so panicked at the time, none of them mentioned it. Then Xiao A quickly took out his phone to call Xiao D. The phone rang for a long time, but no one answered. He called again, but still, no one answered. Xiao B and Xiao C also started to panic. The 3 of them didn't dare go home and ran straight to Xiao D's house. The door to Xiao D's house was open, and when they went inside and saw Xiao D's mother, Xiao A immediately asked if Xiao D was home. But Xiao D's mother said that Xiao D hadn't come home all night, and she even asked them where Xiao D had gone. Faced with something like this, the 3 of them didn't dare to lie and told everything that happened last night in detail, from going camping deep in the mountains, to seeing the woman, and then to Xiao D running off and getting lost. At first, Xiao D's parents didn't believe them at all. Pointing at them, they scolded, "Did you take Xiao D to an internet cafe and then make up this kind of story to fool us?" But seeing that they were all covered in injuries, their clothes torn, and their faces deathly pale, Xiao D's parents started to panic too. They quickly called people in the village, asking everyone to go up the mountain to search for Xiao D. The three of them went home and were each scolded and beaten by their parents, but none of them had the heart to argue back. Their minds were filled with worry about Xiao D's whereabouts. A dozen or so adults from the village took hose and flashlights up the mountain to search. They looked from morning until nightfall, searching every cave and mountain path the kids had been to, but there was still no sign of Xiao D. Early the next morning, Xiao D's parents reported to the police. When the police arrived, they recounted everything that had happened again, but the police just said they might have been drunk and hallucinating, and told them to think again about where Xiao D might have gone. It wasn't until the afternoon that someone searching the mountain came to report that they had found Xiao D at the bottom of a cliff more than 10 kilometers from the cave. By the time they found him, he had already stopped breathing and his body was covered in wounds of all sizes. Xiao Di's mother fainted from crying on the spot while his father squatted on the ground, clutching his hair with both hands, unable to say a single word. Xiao A, Xiao B, and Xiao C stood to the side, feeling cold all over, as if something was blocking their hearts, making it hard to breathe. They kept thinking that if they hadn't suggested going deep into the mountains, if it weren't for what happened last night, Xiao D wouldn't have died. The police investigated for a long time and finally concluded it was an accidental fall. They said the group were minors and had been drinking, so it was normal for them to have hallucinations. People in the village were also talking about it. Some said they had caused trouble, while others said that mountain was always a strange and ominous place. Later, Xiao D's parents moved away and left the village. Their house stood empty next to Xiao A's, and every time Xiao A passed by the gate, the yard always felt cold and deserted. After that, Xiao A, Xiao B, and Xiao C rarely kept in touch. Whenever they met, if anyone mentioned those deep mountains or Xiao D, no one would say a word. Even now, Xiao A still doesn't dare to go into the mountains, and at night, she can't sleep with the lights off. Whenever she closes her eyes, she sees those bare feet and the figure of Xiao D running away. Many people don't believe the story the three of them told, but deep down, all three know that everything that happened that night in the mountains was absolutely real. So, what do you all think about this incident? Was it truly an encounter with something inexplicable, or was it a tragedy caused by hallucinations after the teenagers got drunk? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I'm Xiao Pai. See you next time.